3. A live podcast sponsored by the Marin Fire History Group. All about the history of the fire service in Marin County, California. And now your host, retired Fire Chief Bill Lellis.
Good day, and once again, welcome to the Marin County Fire Chief's historical website. Today we will be discussing the psychology of wildland fires as we are approaching another summer and fall and winter forest fires here in California. Here's a series of ads that we're all familiar with, have seen from the early wildland fires, and buy a hamburger, vote for me, go to Utah, whatever. What's going on here with these different kinds of illustrations? These are all familiar slogans that we've seen from when the zip first came out for the mail. Don't pollute, automobile safety, seatbelt safety, and take a bite out of crime. These are all familiar slogans that we're all familiar with and can probably identify without a lot of thinking. What they really are doing, and what the program today is about, is the impact of Smokey the Bear. You're being seduced to buy something, to change your thinking habits based on an image. And as it has to do with wildland fires in America, from the turn of the 19th century, the wildland prevention was normally a county and statewide forestry projects. Here we have the top one with the 1930, that was in the state of Alabama. We have Tennessee, we have California, West Virginia. So all over the nations, they were pretty much the same green on green illustrations, trying to tell the local citizens in their state or county to do what they can about preventing wildland fires. And as we come into the 1930s, things are beginning to change as it relates to wildland firefighters. We have a war going on in Europe in 1937. The Japanese in the Pacific is not looking too friendly, and our government has to address the impact of our forest in the country, and the amount of impact they have on our gross national product. And so with that, they had to rethink, how are we going to advertise safety in the national forest? And in the 30s, the animals were always very popular. The little squirrel on the top left is one. The one on the wildland fire below that is a nice one illustrating forest and homes and cabins being destroyed. Industry on the lower right is so, and the one in the middle, there's a series of 5. Basically, for all intents and purposes, we'll call them stamps. They're not postage stamps you could use on an envelope, but they are stamps that would be put on an envelope that if you got mail, it would be a reminder about putting out your cigarettes, and as it relates to forest fires. This is a 1941. It's one of the first forest defenses is a national defense. So all of a sudden, the word national defense is becoming 1941. It's in the fall of 1941. December 7th is still out, but the government is aware of what potentially could happen. So they start to remind us of how every citizen has got to take an active role in doing their share of preventing forest fires. And on that December 7th, 1941, our world would change forever, and it would change our attitude towards wildland fires. When President Roosevelt said those famous words, that would live in infamy. A month after Pearl Harbor, a submarine surfaces off the coast of Santa Barbara, right on Highway 1, and there's an oil refinery right there between Santa Barbara and north of Santa Barbara. And it threw 15 shells from its surface gun at the refinery, hoping to cause wildland fires and disrupt the product of petroleum products. This was probably first and only attack on what we call mainland America. We had, up in Alaska, we did have the Japanese have some of our islands early in the war, but this is the only time the mainland America was actually attacked by enemy. In addition to that, the Japanese taking full advantage of what we call the jet stream across the Pacific. The jet stream flows at about 300 miles an hour at high elevations. So by making balloons and attaching explosive devices to these balloons, it was their way of sending them across the Pacific, hoping they would land any place on the west coast of America and cause the wildland fires. They went as far as balloons went as far as Detroit, Michigan, so that was quite a distance. Not one ever really exploded to cause a wildland fire, but I will back up just one in Oregon in 1945. A family out on a picnic found one of these balloons hanging in the trees, not knowing what it was, and I went to it, and I touched it and activated it, and it killed 5 of our citizens, 4 children, and a woman who was carrying a child. So, and just recently, a few years ago, they found another one up in British Columbia. Now we're talking; these were all sent over in 1945, 44. And there's still, who knows how many more, still might be hanging in a pine tree someplace in one of our forests. So they were a last-ditch attempt by the enemy to destroy our wildland forest. The enemy in these are depicted in these stamps and posters and bookmarks. We're at this in 2020. This is quite a distorted image of a nationality, but we were at war. They had bombed Pearl Harbor. Europe was on fire with the Nazis. So these ads were really to hit our psyche, scare us, concern us, that everything we had to do was to defeat this enemy. Keep in mind from this picture of Raiders of the Lost Ark that everything that was going to be shipped in America, both to the European front and the Pacific front, would be done in wooden crates and boxes. And so to prevent this from being destroyed was paramount in the thinking of our leaders. Firefighters and young Americans were signing up to defend the country, leaving a shortage of people to watch over the forest. So what was the government to do? In 1944, Walt Disney had just released the movie Bambi. It was a story of a young deer with his 2 friends, Thumper and Flower. You guess which one is Flower. But he only loaned it to the National Forest for 1 year. And within that next year, they had to come up with another icon that we would all relate to. And as soon as we saw it, we knew we would be looking at something about preventing forest fires. So in 1944, they created a bear with a campaign hat, blue jeans, and a bucket of water, putting out a campfire. And you notice the slogan at the time. This is the first poster. Smokey says, "Care will prevent 9 out of 10 wood fires." Now we're talking 1944. We're in full blow with the war. In 1947, the first, what we call a Cinderella stamp, was issued. It was opening a new hobby for the American children, and including myself. This is one of my hobbies, and forestry stamps are part of one of the areas I collect. So this is from my collection. But this is the first stamp, and you can notice now that Smokey has a shovel. And remember, only you can prevent forest fires. That's the slogan that would go for over 75 years, that we would just put into our psyche. Here's a little quiz for you. What is Smokey's real name? Is it Smokey, Smokey Bear, Smokey the Bear? And who was Smokey named after? I'll come back to that in a little while, but just give it some thought. Is it Smokey, Smokey Bear, Smokey the Bear, and who is Smokey named after? Smokey Bear is his real name. Smokey the Bear is the word "the" was added to when they were writing the song about Smokey. It made the song rhyme much easier. But Smokey Bear is his official name. Who was Smokey named after? Legend says, keep in mind, there was a cartoon in the national papers called Smokey before in the 30s. And Smokey was named after a New York City chief officer. And that's chief fire officer. So that's how the word Smokey came about, from a cartoon that later would be addressed and put into the national public announcement services. 1950, Smokey gets his name on his belt buckle. 2 cubs looking in a deer. These images were aimed at children and all Americans, mostly 8 to 9-year-old kids, but they would talk to their parents. So what effect is it going to have? What's new about Smokey's dress? Take a look at Smokey, see if you can see anything new about him. Now Smokey has his name in his hat. So they're dressing him up as he goes. In 1976, they came out with a whole series on our bicentennial, a whole series of Smokey Bear stickers. I call them stamps. They're called Cinderella stamps. A Cinderella stamp is something that looks like a stamp but can't be used for postage. They're all over the world. Every country has Cinderella stamps. But this is the bicentennial year, so it was a good time to put our presidents and a picture of Smokey on these stickers. Smokey had a lot of friends over the years, and they approached the eggs, the nest of eggs. The only fire insurance for their home is you. Charles Schultz, out of Sebastopol, California, added his classic image about Smokey on his 50th year anniversary, and cartoons of all the animals in the lower right-hand poster. There was a lady who lived in one of the Larksville volunteer firemen's wives was one of the artists on some of these posters that National Forest Service put in, and this could be one of hers. Since the Wildland Prevention Campaign began in 1944, the total number of acreage burned annually dropped from 12 million acres to 6.7 million acres annually. So you got to say right from the start, it had an impact. Smokey and his friends had an impact on our psyche. How successful was this national campaign? It was one of the most successful public service announcements in the history of America. 96% have heard of Smokey. 88% identified his photo. 7 out of 10 knew his slogan. and 56% of 18 to 34-year-olds knew the new campaign. The goal of reducing human-caused fires was never changed. The age-old slogan, "Only you prevent forest fires," underwent a fire ecology update to "Only you can prevent wildfires." What they have discovered that we're saying we want to prevent all fires in the forest. The ecologists are saying, no, we need to have some kind of controlled fires in our forests for them to grow and to prosper. So they added the word wildfires, which to you and I would mean an unfriendly fire versus a fire that was doing the ecology that it's supposed to do of a fire. So they required Smokey to change his slogan. The first stamp, "Only you can prevent forest fires," and now "Only you can prevent wildland fires." So Smokey has done a wonderful job for us over the years. The only problem with having a bear as an emblem, Smokey died. And when you have your slogan die, it's very hard to replace him. But he's still out there. He's still doing it. And you did a great job, Smokey. And thank you. And is the first poster. And on the lower right is the United States postage stamp honoring Smokey the Bear and the cub he once was in the fire in the Lincoln National Forest in New Mexico. We want to thank you for watching today's program, and please stay tuned for the Marin County Fire Department's video on preventing wildland fires in Marin County. Once again, thanks for watching, and be safe out there. Thank you.
This is the most amazing job anybody could ever ask for. I work with 150 of the most dedicated people I've ever been around. They absolutely love the job they do. They're here to serve our communities, and the effort and energy they put into that shows every day. Marin County Fire Department has a rich history. It dates back to the early timber industry at the turn of the century after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, evolving into the Tamalpais Forest Fire District, and eventually in 1942, the Marin County Fire Department. Marin County has a long history of devastating wildfires. Our most recent, the 1995 Mount Vision fire on the coast, destroyed 40 homes and consumed nearly 12,000 acres. In Marin County, although we have a considerable number of fire agencies, we act as one. So we really have seamless borders. And really the intent behind that is to make sure that regardless of the geographical boundaries of a city, a town, a district, or the county, whenever you call 911, you're going to get the closest appropriate resource.
Marin County Fire, this is Sheree. How can I help you?
Often the citizens of Marin don't realize is that they can call us for tree down, wires down, fire permits, water flowing the residence, any kind of non-emergency like that. We're more than happy to help them.
We're serving every level of emergency services, from hazardous materials, wildland fire protection, prevention, structural fire control. Training is an enormous part of what we do, but it's also engaging our communities, preparing them for disaster.
In 1995, we partnered with the Department of Public Works to create the Urban Search and Rescue Team, and that really started our Special Operations program. As part of the USAR team and part of the Special Operations, we have a confined space team, trench rescue, water rescue team, and an incident management team. And the model that we created has been followed by 11 other regional task forces in the state of California. In December 2005, going into January 2006, we had a significant storm that brought 10 inches in 3 days. The water rescue team came in and in a very swift water, dangerous urban nighttime environment, executed 15 rescues and evacuated 30 members of the public. In 2006, the USAR team was deployed to Mill Valley when a mudslide went into a house, buried essentially the back end of the house. And the USAR team worked for 3 days to first find the man that was trapped in the back and then remove him so we can return him back to his family. In October 2008, we had the Angel Island fire, a fire that burned half the island. And while the firefighters were on the island fighting the fire, the IMT was in a role to support the planning functions and the logistical functions for the fire.
Our mission as the Marin County Fire Department is to be prepared, respond quickly, solve problems, be nice, and get home safely.